I surveyed a bunch of Utah law enforcement officers a couple of years ago on Facebook. There was a Facebook group called Utah Law Enforcement Officers, and I asked them, they knew my background, that I'm retired, and I said, hey, if you officers could come to a class to offer some tips on concealed carry, what would you like these folks to know to make them successful in concealed carry? And I'm going to tell you in the order of the popularity of their responses, and that would be gauged by the number of likes and comments that these officers' tips were, in order of most popular to the lowest number. The first overwhelmingly advice that they gave was, tell these people to mind their own business and don't go looking for trouble. Only intervene if it's necessary and it's prudent to do so. The second advice was, the officer said, tell them concealed carry means nobody knows that they're carrying. Printing through their Ranger Up t-shirt is not concealed carry. The other officer said, if you're going to get a concealed firearm permit, then carry all the time. Officers like you to carry a gun. If you're a lawful gun owner and you're trained and you've got a concealed carry license, they like people to have the ability to protect themselves. The officer stated that the gun doesn't really do you much good if you leave it at home and you're out grocery shopping. The other officer said, plan on if you intervene in a situation and you draw your gun on somebody, be prepared for that gun to be taken away and used against you. Yes, that gun is not always going to scare somebody, okay? They just might want to take that gun away from you. So have the mindset to deal with that. The other officer said, tell them to train, okay? Know how to function and run your gun flawlessly through practice and ingrain those skills into muscle memory. Practice loading and unloading, drawing techniques, gripping the pistol. Practice doing mag changes. Practice squeezing the trigger. And prepare for those what-ifs that may happen. And I agree with that because it prepares you for those uneventful, unexpected things that may come your way. That's one thing I would always tell rookie police officers, hey, go through the what-ifs when you're on the job and you got a little bit of extra time on your hands and you're on the graveyard shift, go through that what-if process. What would I do if this happened? What would I do if that happened? In one word, all they need to know is mindset. If you have the proper mindset, then you're going to be very well prepared for a situation. In the state of Utah, there is no duty to inform the officer on a traffic stop that you are carrying when you're armed. It's called no duty to inform law. However, I recommend that you do inform them, and let me just tell you why. First of all, it sets the tone for the whole contact with the cop, whether that's a traffic stop or in person. It makes a good first impression with that officer when they know that you've got a license to carry and you're carrying armed. This tells the officer that, you're not a bad guy or a bad girl with a gun, that you're not a restricted person, that you've had a background check done on you, and you've had some training that you sought out on your own. It speaks to your character that you just didn't, carry a gun without any training. And that has been confirmed by a highway patrol trooper that I talked to here in Utah. He said that very thing about speaking to their character. The officer will know the status of your CFP and whether you have one or not when they do a driver's license check. When they run that driver's license on that stop, that concealed firearm permit is going to be at the bottom of that driver's license screen, and it will tell you the status. So it's always a good idea to give them a heads up, and it doesn't look like you're hiding anything and you are being transparent with them. So please don't tell the officer, Phil said I would get a warning, okay? But I have had officers, a few of them that I've talked to, that said they tend to give folks warnings for very minor traffic violations. So let's say that you're going, 5 over the speed limit and you've got a concealed carry card. I've actually heard them say that, okay? That really, when I was working in patrol, that really wasn't the deciding factor for me, but you do have officers that are of that opinion. I'll give you some quick tips that I can give you when you're stopped by a police officer on a traffic stop. okay? And if you do these things, that traffic stop is probably going to go very well. First of all, pull over quickly as soon as possible to a safe stop. A safe place to stop your car. Don't stop in the lane on the freeway and risk that officer's life in danger. You're going to make a bad first impression doing that. Once you pulled over, put the car in park, okay? Roll down the windows to the car. Turn the ignition off. Turn on the dome light. Light up the interior of your car if it's dark. And place your hands on the steering wheel and wait for that officer to contact you. Don't be digging through your glove box and don't be digging through your wallet trying to get, your driver's license and your registration and your insurance card all ready to go, thinking that you're going to save that officer time. That is going to go against you doing that. And the reason is, it's called furtive movements. So when that officer stops you and he's calling out your plate number and vehicle description to dispatch, he's watching inside of the car. And if he sees you, reaching through the glove box and, digging in your pockets and, maybe you dropped your driver's license on the floorboard, you're down there, reaching under the seat. Those are called furtive movements, and you could give an officer grounds to pull you out of the car and to search in those areas if he reasonably believes that somebody's life is in danger. Here's another thing. Never, ever put your hands in your pocket when you're talking to an officer. And I see this all the time. They drill into the police academy, into these recruits' heads. That is one of the 5 deadly errors that gets officers killed, and it's true. Failure to watch the hands. And people do this as a nervous reaction, okay? And it took me a couple of years to figure this out at patrol. This wasn't something that they taught in the police academy, and they should. But that a psychological nervous response is, when an officer walks up to them in that uniform and that gun, that's a little intimidating. They're nervous. They don't know if they're going to get in trouble or not. And, they'll stick their hands in their pockets. And, the first guy that stuck his hands in his pockets when I graduated from the police academy and I was out there on graveyard shift, he stuck his hands in his pockets and I drew a gun on him. Get your hands out of your pockets slow right now! And this guy about shit his pants, okay? He was shaking and he brought his hands out slow and raised them up in the air like I asked him to do. And turns out he didn't have a gun on him, okay? And I explained to him, I apologized, and I said, I really apologize for having to draw that gun, but, you were in the wrong place at the right time, okay? I'm in a high crime area, I'm on graveyard shift, I get a suspicious person call, guy matching your description, you've got baggy clothes on, something was in your pocket and you reached while I was talking to you. And so, he said he understood and I didn't get a complaint to my sergeant. If you're involved in a self-defense situation with an officer, okay? Let's say you got a gun drawn on somebody and you've used your gun in self-defense and that officer is en route. If you can holster that gun before that officer gets there, you don't want to have a gun in your hand, okay? You may not match the description of the suspect in that call, but they might not have heard that. All they see is, a gun in your hand. They got that tunnel vision, their heart rate is elevated and they want to go home to the end of the shift. And, even if you're a good guy or girl and you got that gun in your hand, you're at a very unfair, dangerous disadvantage of doing so. And a good dispatcher is going to let you know that to have that gun secured if it's safe to do so. If it's not safe to do so, well then, that's a situation that might come your way that you have no control over. Also, a professional or trained police officer will tell you the reason that they stopped you in a traffic stop. Absent a valid reason, they should tell you why they stopped you. If they don't tell you why they stopped you, you can ask them nicely, Officer, why was I stopped? Why did you stop me? If the officer tells you to show them your driver's license or your identification card, don't follow the advice of some of these YouTube creators and, refuse to roll down your window or refuse to show them ID or assert your rights with them and say, these are my rights, and what grounds do you have to do this? I mean, I've seen that happen, but you're not going to gain any favor for doing so. And if you feel like that they're violating your rights and they don't have legal grounds to do so, the roadside is not the time to get into the beef with the officer. You're going to lose that fight on the side of the road. That is their domain. Okay? So they may be telling you to do that in the advice of these YouTube videos to get clicks, but it's only going to hurt your case when it goes to court. You could always ask nicely for a sergeant or other supervisor to respond to the scene if you feel like the traffic stop or that other contact is going bad and you'd like to have a supervisor out there, but understand that they don't have to do that. There might not be a supervisor available, or maybe they just flat out don't want to do it for whatever reason. Maybe they know they did something wrong. Who knows? Also, keep in mind that most law enforcement officers these days wear body cameras, okay? And I checked with the department policy in the city where I live, and their policy is actually that whenever officers are in contact with citizens, they shall activate their body cameras. So if you're being a big jerk on there and sitting there and play, jailhouse lawyer on the side of the road and questioning their authority and questioning their rights, you're just going to look like a jerk in front of a judge or a jury if you're charged. And you're not going to get a lot of sympathy for doing that. Okay, Utah, like we said earlier, there's no duty to inform the officer that you're carrying. But as we said earlier, it's always a good idea. If you are going to inform them, don't just blurt out, I have a gun. Okay, that can go bad really fast. The officer on the driver's side talking to you, here's gun. Gun, you have a gun? And the guy on the passenger side, gun, where's the gun? You can create a lot of chaos that you don't need. You want to preface it with, sir or ma'am, I have a concealed firearm permit license to carry. Keep the firearm permit in your wallet under your driver's license. When you reach it out, you got your driver's license here, and you got your concealed firearm permit. You say, sir or ma'am, just a heads up, here's my license to carry. I just wanted to let you know as a courtesy. After you've done that, then you can tell them, sir or ma'am, if you're curious, I am carrying today. See how that sounds not so scary? An officer, if you tell them that, they may ask you where the gun is. And if they don't ask, you could, offer to tell them where it is if you'd like to. Just wait for their question, wait for their response to see how that's going to go and what they would like you to do. They're probably just going to thank you for letting them know that you're armed. Some cops will say, well, I'd be disappointed if you weren't carrying a gun, sir. Like I said, officers like you to carry when you have a permit and you're a lawful gun owner. Here's another thing. You may not want to kiss ass to the officer, but you know what? Saying yes, sir, and no, sir, and yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am goes a very long way. And it's very difficult for officers, at least I'm speaking for myself, when somebody would call me yes, sir, or no, sir, it was very difficult for me to write them a citation because they had respect for me. And officers, they like to be respected, and they're not used to people talking to them like that. Okay, so if you feel like the officer violated your rights or they did something that was unlawful, I'm just going to tell you what to do. Let's say even they did an illegal search or something along that line, and you could not resolve that with a supervisor on the scene. Here's some more advice. If you have a problem with an officer, something that they did, you can ask very nicely to get their name and their badge number. Okay, most departments have a policy that the officers are required to furnish that upon the request by a private citizen. If you're an officer watching, okay, don't just, point to your, name tag and say it's right here. Okay, that just looks unprofessional, and that is not going to help you when you go to court and you're trying to get your ticket prosecuted or your case. If you do need to file a complaint with law enforcement, that's something that police do, okay? They have to take your complaint. And just quite frankly, if I was going to file a complaint, I would just call and or email the chief of police or the sheriff, the top law enforcement administrator in the agency, and that would be a good starting point, okay? And if you don't get your situation resolved to your satisfaction, I would go up to the mayor next. And if the mayor didn't give a shit, then maybe you could write or call. I'd probably write a letter to the city council members. And anyway, you never know. And then maybe if they don't do something, you could always go to the city attorney, but that's, kind of how that goes. Now let's talk about stop and frisk law in Utah. Utah Title 77-7-15, as amended May 14th of 2019, states that officers can stop you in a public place based on reasonable suspicion or probable cause, and they can demand your name, address, a date of birth, and an explanation of your actions, as I just mentioned earlier. Utah Title 77-7-16, officers can frisk you for a dangerous weapon if they got you lawfully stopped, as I mentioned, and they can do that if they have a reasonable fear of their safety or that their life is in danger or anybody else's life is in danger during that contact. 77-7-17, officers can keep a weapon if they find it on you during that detention while they're questioning you stop you temporarily. And when they're finished with their contact with you, if it's lawfully possessed, they shall return it to you or make an arrest if it's unlawfully possessed. There's such a thing called voluntary conversations, and this is in your Utah curriculum. In Utah, there's no law against open or concealed carrying in public. It's not a crime unless there's other circumstances or behavior that you're doing when you're open carrying a gun that leads that officer to believe that you are doing something criminal in nature. However, it is widely accepted in law enforcement. Officers can make voluntary contact you. They can walk up to you and they can say, "Hey, can I see your ID? Hey, do you have a permit to carry that gun?" And if you engage in that talk with them, that is a voluntary conversation that you're having, and they can use that as evidence during these contacts with you. And you may feel like you're being detained in these situations. And to clear that up very fast, if you're not sure, you could ask them. You could say, "Officer, am I being detained?" And if they say no, then you are free to leave and you can walk away from that situation. You don't have to answer questions. Lastly, Utah Title 53-2A-214. The governor and government officials, such as law enforcement officers, during a national emergency cannot confiscate guns, ammo, and things like that during a national emergency. And that law was established in 2013. It's really nice to know that officers, if they're ordered to do so by superiors, cannot be disciplined for failure to carry out those orders from their superiors. And if that happened to you, you could take them to court on a civil case, and they could be fined up to $10,000 for violating your rights under this law. Okay, this concludes the contacts with law enforcement officers video.